Yep, this is the one. This is the one. Toot 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 toot. But it is. Toot 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 toot. Toot 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 toot.
Just to hit the main level.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right, so while we figure out a way to get the microphones back on, I want to make sure that we realize we want to get started, so we're going to work as fast as we can to get the microphones working. But in the meantime, I think we should all be able to hear as long as we're all quiet. So, yes. Sure. During his story, you'll hear all about his life. So, Bob here told me not to give him a real introduction today, to just say this is Bob. However, I am very happy that I've known Bob my entire life. So for me, this is Bob is an understatement. This is Bob. Right? So I'm very excited for you to all hear his story, Gabriella's story, and that we're going to have a chance to maybe ask some questions and learn a lot tonight. And so please bear with us for the sound issue, though it seems to be working out pretty well right now. And with no other introduction, this is Bob. Thank you. Pull that one in. See, there's what? Oh, for the whiteboard? Take that whiteboard eraser. Yeah, here. That's good.
Let's pull this out.
We turned the wireless back on? Yep. Doo doo. All right. Great. This is perfect.
Okay. So, I'll back up a little more. The Holocaust. The Holocaust, as we all know, since this is a Jewish school, 6 million Jewish people died. Along with 6 million Jewish people, there were 5 million non-Jewish people that died. These were people like... Do I need a mic?
Yeah, for the live recording. That way others can watch too.
Anyway, whoa, maybe it's okay. So, these were people like gays, handicapped, people of perhaps a little different color. In fact, a quick story, one day when I was talking at the Los Angeles Museum of the Holocaust, one of the gentlemen says to me, "Bob, you have time for lunch?" I said, "Sure." So he's sitting across from me at lunch, and he says, "You know, my father was killed in Auschwitz." My father's brother, my uncle, was killed in Auschwitz. And then he looks me in the eye and he says, I'm not Jewish. To me, it was just a shock. You know, I know the numbers, but to sit across from somebody, not Jewish, that his father and uncle were killed there. So I said, why? He said, well, they were like council members, officials in a city, and the Germans killed the smart people. They didn't want the smart people or the leaders to gang up or swarms of people against them. So they killed a lot of leaders. So that makes up the 5 million. So if you look at all this, and these numbers, unfortunately, you get 11 million people died. Most of them died between 1941 to 1945. That means that approximately this many people were murdered every single day. Every single day. Mind-boggling. Can some of the kids answer this question? Kids, not you. How many people died at 9/11? For sure, too many. But how many? Give me a number. How many? No. Less. Much less. Roughly 3,000, did you say? Good. You're right. Approximately 3,000. Now, that's the worst tragedy on American soil, right? Pretty bad. Tragedy. I'm not denying that. But look, think about this. This is every single day for 4 years. It's mind-boggling. There's nothing like this has ever happened and will never happen again. Getting back to me now for a minute. For me, in Poland, the Holocaust started in 1939. Actually in 1938 with Kristallnacht. Maybe even before then. But the mass killings, deportation started in 1939, mass killings not till 1941. Let me show you a little bit about my life before the Holocaust. That's little me with my nanny. That's my brother and I. There were only 2 of us. He's the taller one. That's my mother and my father at their wedding. Again, that's myself, my brother. And I show this tricycle because, you know, I was 4 years old, 1939, when the Germans came into our apartment, not just our apartment, all Jews, and said we have a half hour to leave. So what's important for a 4-year-old? Toys, stuff you just got. I just got a nice little red tricycle. I had to leave it behind. My friend Gabriella painted that. She's an artist. It's not clicking there. Oops, now I went too far. Okay, what we had to do when the Germans, you see, I was born right here, in a city that was basically over in Poland, but almost touching Germany. So it's right on the border. So the Germans made all the Jews in this part of Poland, which they occupied, this half, move. So we moved all the way here to a city called Stanislavov. In fact, it's now so far east, it's Ukraine. The borders have changed. How we did it, we did a lot of jumping on wagons. There were no trains for us. We walked, we hitched rides. We somehow got there. We got to that place there. Oh, I got it. Thank you very much. Thank you. So now it's 1941. Okay, I'm 6. My brother's 8. The Germans kind of tore up the agreement they had with the Russians to occupy Poland half and half, and they started invading Poland. And they wanted to quickly take over Poland very quickly. So they bombed Poland. And kind of the reason that's so significant in my story, because as they were bombing, we were trying to protect ourselves. We were putting up mattresses against windows. You know, the bombs of that time frame were not as strong as today. You were more afraid of stuff coming down on top of you. Anyway, bottom line, in all this strenuous work, my father got a heart attack and he died. My mother went out looking for doctor, medications. You can imagine it was a very chaotic, very upsetting time. There was no one around, nothing was... Anyway, he died. So the Germans moved into town. And about a week after he died, they moved into town. The very first thing they did, they told all the Jewish people to come to the center of town. The town had about 20,000 Jewish people. That's one problem with this whiteboard, I have no eraser. Can I use your shirt? Tomorrow, that's okay. Or maybe somebody have a napkin or something, a Kleenex? Well, that'll work. Oh my God, so many volunteers. Okay, she's got tissues. That's great. That's good. Thank you very much. So nobody needs to blow their nose. Incidentally, the way we usually do it, Gabriella and I, you know, I'll speak for maybe 3.5 hours. Then she'll pick up for about 20 minutes, half hour. Anyway, we'll have questions afterwards, after we both finish.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I don't know how to transition. Anyone driving a silver Volkswagen Jetta 4-door? Anyone? You? Okay. Yeah? Anyone? No? This should be fun. Let me find you an eraser.
Oh, it's Kleenex works. Don't worry about it. So they told all the Jews to come to the center of town. Some of you, not the young people, maybe have traveled in Europe. You know, in Europe, all cities have a center of town, as opposed to the U.S. They trucked us to a cemetery. Picture this cemetery. Mass graves were already dug here. So they'd forced 20,000 people into the cemetery. That day they murdered 14,000 people from morning till night. This is like the second largest massacre. So why did I survive? Well, I can just tell you one thing. You young people, you'll never meet a luckier or hear a luckier guy than me. Never. Because when we got to the cemetery, we somehow were forced onto the early trucks. We had no idea. And we were back here. So at the end of the day, when the shooting stopped, started snowing, got dark, the Germans told the remaining 6,000 they could leave. In fact, just recently in May, I met a guy for the first time. Mind you, this is like God knows how many years later, right? That also survived the cemetery. Never met anyone. And he's like 10 years older than me. And the Germans dragged him to dig these graves. And when he saw what was happening, he ran behind one of the stones. And he saw what was happening, and he ran away and survived. You know, Baba Yar, which some of you may have heard, is like the worst tragedy, one-day tragedy and killings. This unfortunately is the second. So when this happened, the 6,000 people were told to leave. There was pandemonium. Everybody started running towards the back, towards the gates. Somehow my brother and I got separated from my family. We were kind of all separated. We were knocked down on the ground. We were actually not just knocked down, but knocked out cold. My grandmother was also knocked down, but not out. And she had kind of, in all this confusion, lost the scarf. So she started looking on the ground for a scarf. And sure enough, she found me, revived me. She looked some more because she knew if I was there, maybe my brother would be there. She found him. And we went back to the apartment. Recently, somebody, like within the last 6 months, when I was speaking at the museum, a young lady came up to me and she said, you know, I'm in the Peace Corps. Peace Corps. I thought that was gone a long time ago. Some of you remember John Kennedy started that, I believe. But anyway, and she said, I'm stationed in this town of Stanislavov. So I said, wow, fantastic. So I gave her a list of pictures I wanted. So she sent them to me. So this is like the memorial for that cemetery. See, when my wife and I were there about 40 years ago, nothing was there, just blank ground. And unfortunately, the graves, as you can see, some people have done something like that to commemorate the ones that died, but that was it. So that's kind of as it looks today. She sent me a lot of pictures. Those were the two I chose to show. I never had a picture of what it looks like today. In fact, it's interesting. I got a text or an email from her yesterday. They want to Skype with me to Stanislavov. So that'll be an interesting experiment. I've Skyped with schools in this country, colleges, but I've never Skyped to a foreign country. So we'll try that. We'll see if it works. Okay, the remaining 6,000. Oh, when we got back to the apartment, this is also very important, everything was gone. And I do mean everything. Beds, furniture, clothes, everything. One item remained, and that was a bucket that my grandfather made for my mother. And the bucket had a false bottom. So here was your water. And my mother, before she left for the cemetery, put all her jewelry and everything else in the bottom. Nobody took the bucket. Believe it or not, that jewelry saved our lives many times. Bought us a loaf of bread. One day my mother was caught. This is years later after what and she gave the German a beautiful gold watch. He let her go. So you could do that sometimes. Anyway. So that was key. That remained. You know, in those days you cooked and heated with a fireplace. So everybody had a bucket with a fireplace. Okay, when this was over, the 6,000 remaining Jews were put in a ghetto. That is also a picture I got from that young lady that's in the Peace Corps. And it's hard to see from far away, but that's the outline of the ghetto. But if you're a young man like some of you are here, I want to make sure you know what a ghetto is. Say this is a city, okay? They take a very small part of the city, put a very, very high fence all around it, one gate, and they kind of jabbed the 6,000 Jewish people into this ghetto. There were 500 ghettos in Poland alone. It's mind-boggling. Every little city had a ghetto. Now, a ghetto was just a containment for Jews, not non-Jews, just Jews. Of course, the largest ghetto was the Warsaw Ghetto, with 500,000 people, Jewish people. So we were put in this ghetto. We lived with like I think it was 3 other families, one of these houses here. One bathroom, one little kitchen, no food. My mother would go out every day out of the ghetto. When I say my mother, I mean like thousands of people her age, like your guys' age, the adults here. Anybody in their 20s, 30s, or 40s would be marched out and work outside the ghetto. The work consisted of scrubbing floors, cleaning toilets, washing walls, hard labor work. But when she was out there, she was able to negotiate with some Polish women for a loaf of bread with a piece of her jewelry. Because when she came back to the ghetto, she had the starving families, 2 starving kids, her mother, other parts of her family. So she basically could be able to bring us some food for the jewelry that was saved. I want to show you one more thing, just in terms of a little Holocaust education. Some of you may know this. All 6 camps, you see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the camps that had the extermination and the gassing, you might say the killing machines, as some people refer to them, were all in Poland. And the reason they were in Poland, as I mentioned earlier, 1 out of 10 people in Poland was Jewish, 10%. The U.S., I believe, has less than 2%, just to give you an idea. The only country in the world today, of course, that has a higher percentage of Jews is the state of Israel. So Poland had 3.3 million Jewish people. 300,000 survived. So half of the 6 million that were killed were Polish Jews. Half of the 5 million non-Jews that were killed were Polish citizens. Very low percentage. In fact, half of these people survived by running into Russia, not staying in Poland like we did. So the odds were really against you. So the camps, as I'm showing there, all 6 camps were in Poland. There were other concentration camps, don't misunderstand me. But those other camps were work camps, slave camps. People died of starvation, of hard work, and so on. These camps were actually the killing machines. And of course, the most famous one here is Auschwitz. Gabriella and I go on a trip called the March of the Living every year. This will be my 5th and her 7th. And we visit all these camps in Poland. Very tough trip. You have to be a senior to go. So some of you kids have a long way to go yet, but only seniors can go on this trip. Okay, back to the story. My mother, as she was working outside one day, found out that they're going to eliminate the ghetto. So she knew what that meant. I think everybody in the ghetto knew. She didn't know what to do. Did not know what to do. She had a big family. And she did what kind of most Jews at that time did, perhaps even today do. She went to a rabbi to ask for advice. And the rabbi said to her, look, save the 2 kids. That's the future. You have 2 boys, save them. You cannot save the whole family. Figure out a way to run away from this ghetto with the 2 boys. She listened, thank goodness for me. The way we did it, when she marched out of the ghetto, out of the gate, I was under her skirt, literally. Don't forget, I was only 6. My brother was 8. He was under her girlfriend's skirt. So as these thousands of people marched out, nobody saw the 2 little extra feet of the 2 kids that were left. She then, when she marched, she got to a place of work, she put us in a closet and said, stay here, I'll get you at night. So I want to ask some of you young kids here, do you think you could stay in a closet and be quiet all day? No way, right? You know, I have 3 children. I couldn't keep quiet for 5 minutes. But my mentality was different, I guess. That's the only way I can explain it. My brothers, too. Whatever my mother said, we did. We didn't say no way. We didn't say hell no. We didn't say any of those things, right? We just did it. Anyway, at night she came, and we took some trains, many trains, and went to Warsaw. She had met a man in the ghetto who, after the war, actually became my stepfather. And he had a sister in Warsaw, so we had someplace to go. You see, when you have 2 little kids, you can't just run to the forest and go. Many Jews from the ghettos escaped. Like when they went to work, they just didn't go back. But they were more in the 20s, 30-year range. They could actually run into the forest and try to survive that way. And many of them did. Many of them did. There are many movies about that. Some of you perhaps have seen some of these movies. So we went to Warsaw. When we were in Warsaw, my mother still was very concerned about surviving, the three of us surviving, the four of us surviving. And she had three males to contend with. Males were a problem during the war because at that time, only Jewish males were circumcised, nobody else. So of the 10% Jews in Poland, all the males were circumcised. So if a German didn't like what he saw, the papers that you had, or whatever, didn't like whatever, didn't matter where you were. Middle of the street, railroad station, he would check, they would check. If you were circumcised, you were shot right on the spot. So she was concerned about how could she survive with these three males. So she had a contact near the city of Krakow who would take us in, my brother and I. And they made a legal contract. Like if he saves my life, he gets a building that we owned. If he saves my brother's life, he gets a building. A legal contract, they did that. So we were there. For the first time, we ate well. Because a Polish farm, a lot of good food, a lot of food. About the 11th week into this, we did everything with the family. Went to church every Sunday. You know, we were their cousins. One day in church, about 11 weeks after we got there, my brother puts his hat on. Big no-no. You know, in Poland, the Catholic kids, they were born to know. When they were born, they knew they didn't wear hats in church. But he made that mistake. As we all know, we Jewish people do wear hats in church, caps, yarmulkes, whatever. But he made this terrible mistake. So immediately people in the audience in that church said, well, they must be Jews. They must be Jews. So the lady had to get rid of us somehow. She had to get us out of there. Because if a non-Jew helped the Jew, they would all be killed. Not just the family in the house, the extended family. When you hear Gabriella's speech, you'll hear what a brave guy did. That there were so many Poles that did so many brave things to help the Jews. And there were also Poles who didn't. They're both sides. Anyway, my mother came. It was a long trip from Warsaw to Krakow. She decided to only take my brother, left me behind. So the family, this is incidentally me on that farm. I'm the last one here. I went back and found this place, this kid, who's a kid now. Of course, he was about 60 when we were there. Ran upstairs and got me this picture. It's really the only picture I have from that whole time frame. So the family hid me in an attic. We found the house and found the attic. This is me when I'm about in my 40s, I think. We went back there and found this attic. So I was up in this attic for about 12 weeks. Mind you, never washed, never changed clothes, never brushed my teeth. Yuck. Can you imagine that? Hard to imagine, right? Impossible. Well, it did. That's what happened. Every night, I had to be quiet during the day. At night, I would sneak out the window. I found a chicken that laid raw eggs. People sometimes ask me, why do you have so much hair? It's the raw eggs. I don't know. For some of you, it may be too late. Maybe only when you're young. Anyway, I found pigs that left some food. I ate that. Because a lot of times the lady in charge of this farm left and left in charge like a maid or a servant, whatever, and she just didn't pay any attention to me upstairs in the attic. Well, about 12 weeks I was up there, something like that. My mother finally came back for me and took me back to Warsaw. Okay, jumping around a little bit. I have to make sure I don't step on your minutes. Anyway, it's now 1944, okay? Many incidents happened during this time. You know, I can just tell you one that stands out in my mind, especially now because of all this Polish things that have gone on lately. A guy knocked on the door when we were living just outside Warsaw. We had no idea who it was. We never saw this guy in our lives. And he says to my parents, "The Germans are looking for Jews. They're going to come get you. Get the hell out." Mind you, just a strange Polish guy. If he hadn't said that, Gabriella would be our only speaker tonight. So that's what it took. You see, we didn't even pack. We just left to go to another place, hide somewhere else. And that happened many times, many times. So I just want to kind of leave you with the impression a little bit that there were many good Poles that saved Jews. There are many bad ones, but there are many good ones that saved Jews. Like, I have many examples like this one guy knocking on our door. Many. So it's now 1944, okay? We can hear the artillery coming. So what we did, we went to Warsaw. We lived around Warsaw. The reason we went to Warsaw because my mother and stepfather had heard that the Russians were very barbaric. When they came into a home, they would rape the women, they would steal stuff. They were just on the war front a long time. And it made no difference, Jewish, non-Jewish. In fact, maybe some of you have seen the movie The Innocent. Anybody see that movie? Quick line about that movie. This was a movie, a true story, where this were nuns. Nuns in a convent were getting pregnant because the Russians had come through there. So anyway, my mother was not wrong. So we went to Warsaw. When we got to Warsaw, the Warsaw Uprising occurred, okay? Quickly explain that. 43 was the ghetto uprising, okay? I was not involved with that. We were outside. We saw the smoke. That's when the Germans burned the ghetto down, basically killed all the Jewish people in the ghetto. This is the uprising. This is when the Jews that survived the ghetto uprising, many of them survived by going through sewers. If you ever go to Warsaw, you'll see the big sewer lines with, that have signs that say this is where the Jewish people escaped from the Warsaw ghetto uprising. So a lot of them hid the forest with non-Jews, killed some Germans, got some guns, got some ammunition, and rose up against the Germans. So this uprising lasted for 63 days. In fact, there's a big museum in Warsaw now for this uprising. Polish people are pretty proud of this because imagine just a few handfuls of people containing this huge German army. Well, we were caught up in the middle of that. The way we survived it, it's like anyone else, we simply stayed in the cellars all the time because all of Warsaw was pretty much destroyed during this uprising. About 80% of it was destroyed. Well, the Germans finally defeated this, 63 days. They took everybody. Mind you, this is everybody. This is where Poland in 44 was almost, as the Germans said, Judenfrei, free of Jews. There were handfuls, of course, like us, many others, but basically even some of the concentration camps were already closed in 1944 in Poland. So they took us to a train station, everybody. And the reason I tell you that is because most of the people they pushed in the train station were not Jewish at this point, okay? So my mother kept us back. The picture a rail car like this. These are like cattle cars, ship cars, and kept us back. Typical train station scene where the Germans have their German shepherds biting, barking, hitting people, shooting people. You've seen movies, maybe you've seen some of that. It's horrible stuff. My mother somehow kept us back, and she saw finally a car that was mostly open on top. I told you guys I was the luckiest man in the world. I've never seen a car in the thousands of pictures that we've seen in museums. anything that had an open car. No way. Well, as luck would have it, the train stops about 100 meters, 100 yards from Auschwitz. My stepfather grabs me, because I was the smallest in that car. Now, in 44, I was 9. And he throws me over the top. And believe me, when I fell down, I was convinced that I broke every bone in my body because it was so high. You know, there was a ditch there. Fortunately, nothing broke. I just hurt, but nothing broke. And I was able to open the door. I'm showing the kids here on this March of the Living I mentioned earlier. See this latch? Just like that, I'm able to open the door. So here's a kid undernourished. If you took an x-ray of me, you'd be totally wasting your money. You could see every bone in my body. Somehow the door was easy to open. Lucky, because it didn't have to be. Anyway, we escaped. In fact, my mother and stepfather kept yelling at the people, run, run. It was an open door. You're going to get killed. Nobody moved. They all stayed. Here's a case of being Jewish saved my life. You know, because we knew that this gate that says Arbeit macht frei, the famous gate, work makes you free, was just not true. But these other people in the car, they were all non-Jews, believed they were going to work. So they never moved. Anyway, we ran into a farmhouse. The Germans actually came looking for these 4 people. We told the farmer we were the heroes from the Warsaw Uprising. So he lifted up a carpeting, put us in a cellar, and the Germans came. He said, nobody's here, and they left. Well, a few months later, we were liberated by the Russians. Hold your questions till Gabriella's finished. Who's the technician here? Put her slides on, please. Thank you.
You want to tell my name?
And now we have Gabriella.
Hi, everybody. I was just a young girl when the World War II started. And before the war, we lived in a peaceful, democratic country, very similar than we are living here today. And in our wildest dreams, we could not have imagined what will happen, but it did. I am from Slovakia. It was Czechoslovakia when I was born. And just give you a few numbers. So in Slovakia, 90,000 Jewish people lived. In 1942 was the biggest deportation. 60,000 people were taken away. From 60,000 people, 230 people survived. Statistically, it means from 1,000 people, 4 people survived. What a number. Okay. I will remodel. Can see better? before the war, my parents owned a small deli store that was located next to the police station. Because of the location, they knew every policeman. So when the deportation started in 1942 in Slovakia, first of all, it was done by Slovaks, not by Germans. Slovaks were anti-Semitic enough to do all the dirty work. So my parents' store was next to the police station. They knew every policeman. And one of the policemen gave my mother the list of the people who will be taken away on certain night. So my mother joined the underground, gave them the list, and everybody from the underground then cautioned people that tonight for sure at this address you will be taken away. My mother took me with her many, many times because we had a curfew in Slovakia against Jewish people. We were not supposed to be on the street after 6 p.m. And she was hoping with a young girl we won't be stopped. Well, I will never forget a scene in front of my eyes when we went to my mother's cousin. She was on the list, so was her husband, her old mother, and their 4-year-old little boy was on the list, my second cousin. And we told them for sure, tonight, at this address, you will be taken away. Go somewhere, hide somewhere, do something. And they started to cry, and they told us, we have nowhere to go. We already went from one place to another. Hopefully we will work and survive. We never saw them again. I was put in a convent run by nuns. I had false papers that I am a Christian girl. My name was not my name. My birthday wasn't my birthday. I was a different person on papers. I cried myself to sleep every night. I knew I am Jewish, but I had to go to the Mass every day. After a year, my mother came, and when she saw my cried-out eyes, my skinny face, she decided for night she will take me home. And I will try to come in morning to school. And this is what I did next 2 years. In the long run, this saved my life. My mother was very well informed, and she knew that Germany will come and occupy Slovakia, because Slovakia was not occupied until 1944. As I was telling you, the Slovaks did all the work against Jewish people. A gentleman, a 25-year young lawyer who had it in his heart to hide 8 people. Let me show you. See, this is Czechoslovakia. Does the pointer work? Okay. Not for me. Oh, here it is. Okay, this is town of Bratislava. This is the capital of Slovakia. This is where I was born, and this is where I survived. And this is a beautiful castle in Bratislava. I'm 6-year-old here, a very happy child, always laughing, smiling. Here I am about 11. Nobody could make me smile. Hard times of Holocaust. This is my parents' door. This is my dad, my mom with me. This is my 10-year-old birthday party. This is me. I'm the only one who survived. I lost all my friends, every one of them. This is in the convent. You see the window sill? This is where I used to sit and cry. See these two doors? The second door is where the classes were, where I attended for 3 years. We didn't have an easy time to get into the convent. They told us the classes are in session, be quiet, da. We were 7 people. So we were quiet, as 7 people can be. And I was pointing here and there. And Bobby's telling me, knock on the door. Go and talk to the kids there. I said, I cannot barge in. The class is in session. That's me. I'm a teacher. I would let you. Just try. So we are discussing, and I'm saying, I cannot go. You know how. Anyhow, suddenly I hear, like the class is over, noises. Lot of noise. I knock on the door. I still speak fluent Slovak. I went to the nun, the teacher, and I told them, in this classroom, for 3 years, I was sitting, I showed them the chair, and the nun saved me. And she said, why don't you tell it to the class? Oh, okay. So here I gave them about a 10-minute short version of my survival. See, it's after my speech. I didn't even take my jacket off. This is Karol Blanar. This is the man who had it in his heart to risk his own life to save 8 people. And if you can imagine yourself, 9 months, for 9 months, a whole school year, sitting on a chair, not be able to move around, not be able to speak. And the only thing I could do is to read. And Karol Blanar brought me books to read. And he could not bring me books for a young girl. Everybody was watched. So he brought me history books, heavy books to read, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy. And I was reading whatever I got into my hands. I was 13 at this time. For 9 months. And guess what? After liberation, I made a test and I jumped a grade. So I want to tell you something. Everything can be taken away from you. Even the clothes you wear. Everything. But nobody can take away from you what you have in your head. Put good stuff in it. It's yours. It's yours until you leave. Karol Blanar got the honor from Yad Vashem as a righteous person among the nations. This is the certificate. Also his parents are mentioned because they were hiding my grandmother. Righteous family. Karol Blanar, after liberation, wrote a couple of articles against communism. When communists took over, he had to flee the country. We got a word, he made it over the border, but then we lost track. Meantime, I became an adult, and I wanted to thank him, not from the other people. He gave me a chance to live my own life, and I was looking for him everywhere. He could be anywhere in the world. I could not find him. I contacted organizations. I looked through every phone book I could put my hands on. I could not find him. About 15 years ago, I got my first computer, so I Googled him. He didn't come up. Then I remembered he had a younger brother named Vincent Blanar. I put his name in, and he popped up. Vincent Blanar, university professor, wrote about 25 books, a linguist. His name, his address, his phone number was there. I got so excited. I didn't look if it's midnight there or what. I really couldn't care less. So I went to the phone, called him. He picks up the phone, and I'm trying to introduce myself. And he tells me, I remember you. Oh, okay. Just tell me, where is Karol? Well, Karol lived in United States, in Dublin, Ohio. He got married, no children, but he died in 1980. So here I was, years and years later. Missed the chance to thank him, to express my feelings toward him. So I asked him where he's buried. The only thing I can do is to visit his grave. And he had no idea. You know, this time the communist-occupied countries and the free world could not communicate. So he did not know. I called up every cemetery around Dublin, Ohio, and I did not find him. And about 8 years ago, I'm speaking everywhere, but this happened in Los Angeles Museum of the Holocaust. A gentleman approached me and said, I'm very good finding people like that. Just give me some details. I went home, I sent him everything I know, and he found him the next day in Columbus, Ohio, in an unmarked grave. A person who saved 8 people's life did not have his name on his grave. I got so upset. I called right away the cemetery and I asked them, what happened? So some 30 years later, looking through the books, they told me nobody was there, only the priest when they buried him. Nobody paid. That's it. I said, no, that's not it. I am ordering a marker right now, and I want to have written on it, righteous person among the nations. And when they were putting the marker in the earth, I went there with my grandson, and if you would like to hear my goodbye speech, go on my website, GabriellaKarin.com, because my grandson filmed it. You can hear it. Now, this is the apartment of Karol Blanar. It's on this side. It's on the 3rd floor. It's across the street of the Slovak Gestapo Hlinkova Garda. I was just across the street, and I saw many things. When I was in the convent, we were 3 Jewish girls there, 2 sisters and me. One was younger, one was older. And the convent was just 5 minutes walking from the place where I was hidden. And I saw them running on the street, being caught in front of my eyes and pulled into the headquarters. I would have been with them if my mother wouldn't have taken me wherever she was. They never returned. I'm a sculptor. I express my feelings in clay. This is about the nuns hiding 3 Jewish girls. By the way, this sculpture is in Bratislava, Slovakia, in the Holocaust Museum. This is about the hiding. You see the German boots marching in front of the house. I saw them. They didn't see me. I am there in the center, reading. These are the people who were with me, my mother and my father, and I was an only child to my parents, my aunt, 2 uncles, and 2 friends of my parents. We all survived. Karol Blanar bringing us food. He couldn't bring too much. Everybody was watched. We were hungry all the time. This is also in Slovakia in another museum. Our last possessions. First they took away our citizenship, and then they took away our jobs, and then our apartments. And when they took people to the camp, and they arrived with the train and stepped down from the train, the first thing what they took away was the last thing from home, the small luggage. 12 windows to the unforgettable past. The first window shows the Shevastika coming, but the world was silent. November 9, 1938. All over Austria and Germany, they were burning Jewish synagogues. They were breaking into Jewish store windows, throwing out merchandise on the street, religious objects burning. And they started to take Jewish men to camp. This was the beginning of Holocaust. About 9 months before World War II started. And there was a window of opportunity to let children out, children from age 2 to age 17. But the world did not open their gates to let them in. The only place was England, and they saved, how much? Finish?
32 seconds and 10 seconds.
Okay. Thank you. So, I will finish. Thank you so much.
My friend from Palos Verdes informed me we'd have to leave some time for questions. So we have time for questions.
Okay.
I think that the bottom, I mean, you pretty much got the message. Gabriella is a magnificent sculptor, I can tell you that. She has sculptures at the Museum of Tolerance, locally, and many places around the world. Yes.
I will put my card up.
Question? Yes, go ahead.
Do you still have vivid memory of what happened when you were younger?
Do I have vivid memories what happened? Yes. You know, it's an excellent question. Because many times you kind of wonder, were you told this or do you remember this, you know? Because let's face it, for me it was started when I was 4, right? I was in the cemetery when I was 6, you know, just a little kid. However, the reason I think I remember it all is because I can picture it. I know that I had to go down like this pretty much, sit on the ground during the cemetery incident. Anybody that stood up was shot, and I saw that. So I do have vivid memories. I certainly remember all the things I did on that attic, you know. Do you want to answer that too?
No, it's
Okay.
fine.
Yes.
How many people were saved in England?
In where?
In England?
The children.
You're about to.
Oh, the children. He wants to know about the children, you know, the kinder transport.
These children were taken to England. They were placed in private homes, some in certain schools, some in Jewish schools, some in not Jewish places. Different things. But these children, I just want to tell you how much depends on us, what kind of people you want to be. These children educated themselves. They wanted to show their parents what kind of people they become. So it's all up to us, up to all of you. It don't depend on your parents, your teachers, your friends. It depends on you, every one of you, what kind of person you want to be. Don't blame somebody else. You can decide if you want to be good people or not. And together, we can change the world. Thank you. Yes?
Say that again, please.
Who would you choose to save if you could only choose one person?
To save.
Save one person who did not survive.
Who would I save? It's not really we weren't saving people. We were the one being saved, okay? So I'm not sure I quite understand. You just have to realize there were some people, good people, like in her case, it's a very specific name she has of a person who saved 8 people. In my case, I don't even know the names of the people that helped, unfortunately, that helped me survive. I don't. Yes. Well, yeah, me you're talking to? Yes, my grandmother, in fact, this past May, if you remember my story, I met a guy who survived. I met a guy that survived the ghetto about 2 years ago in Houston, incidentally, a friend of your brother's, Elliot. And he survived the ghetto. So he told me that what happened was he survived by going up in the rafters and staying there for days. So when the Germans came looking and looking for Jews in the ghetto, they never saw him. When they stopped looking, he ran away. But he did see what happened. My grandmother and all my relatives were taken to that same cemetery I told you, and they were all shot. They were all killed at that same cemetery. I have to tell you a quick little story. Do you mind if I tell you a quick little story before I get to the questions? Because you reminded me of that. You know, when I came to America, I was 12 years old. Are any of you guys 12 yet? Oh, okay, good. So you know how. Now imagine going to a country without knowing the language, you know, knowing anything. Well, I was lucky because my cousin took me to a school, superintendent, and he said, oh, you're 12, 7th grade. Okay, so I started in the 7th grade. I usually tell kids this, don't quote me. You learn nothing in the first 6th grade, see. That's a joke. Anyway, I started in the 7th grade. So one day I was at a place, you know, went to this is a school which had 7 through 12, like a social event. So I was standing there, you know, everybody was coming in groups, you know how it is even today. And I was alone, I didn't speak very well. Well, a couple of guys came up to me, this is one of them right here, Elliot Rothman, and his twin brother. They looked alike. I thought I was seeing double, but anyway, they came up to me and kind of put their arms around me, and they started talking to me as best as I could, best as they could. And they convinced me to join AZA. I don't know if you guys know what AZA is. It's B'nai B'rith Youth Organization. Okay, some of you may have been BBG girls or AZA. So I joined AZA. So the next day, overnight, I had 35 friends. And that's what kind of turned my life around. And you know what? This is, I won't tell you my age, but this is 70 years later. 70. And Elliot, who lives in New York, and his twin brother, who lives in Houston, are still my best 2 friends. So there's a bottom line to this story for these young people, okay? I know when you go somewhere, you like to go with your friends and 2 or 3 friends. When you see somebody alone, walk up and talk to them. They could become your best friends. Okay, back to questions. Yes. Well, that's when I was, 1947. See, I was lucky. We escaped from Poland through Slovakia to Germany, U.S. Germany. U.S. had these DP camps, displaced people camps. And we had relatives in Pittsburgh. So if you had relatives, you were able to get papers and come over. For example, I'll let her say what happened to Gabriella, but we came 2 years later, in 47, we came to the United States. Tell us what happened.
Well, we couldn't leave. My parents wanted to leave in 39, they couldn't leave. In 45, after so many million people died, the gates were not open, no way. In 48, Israel became Israel independent country, the gates were open. We went to Israel. I got married just before we left to Israel. I was 17, more luck than brains. I had a great marriage. My husband passed away a few years ago. And in 1960, as we got permits to come to United States, they needed the work my husband was doing, so we got in as by working permits. That's my story, and we love it.
Do adults have any questions? Oh, there's an adult. I think she looks pretty young.
Are you either one of you religious, and do you still?
Oh, she hands me the mic.
I can answer. I can answer. Well, you know, we get this question many times, and the question comes many times like, why did God allow to do it? Such a terrible tragedy. And my answer is, God didn't do it. People did it. God gave us a free will to make a decision what kind of people we want to be, and it's up to us. You want to say something?
Sure. Well, as my good friend, Rabbi, can I call you Rabbi already? Not yet. Rabbi soon to be Cher knows. I'm a charter member of the synagogue in Palos Verdes, conservative synagogue. So the answer is I'm very Jewish, very pro-Israel, very pro-Israel. Every survivor is, okay? If there had been in Israel, if. But anyway, so yes, we're very Jewish, both of us, and I think most survivors. I know I'm avoiding the question and being religious. We do go to services. I went last Friday night, for example. But anyway, go to services quite often, obviously on all the holidays and so on. Any other less difficult questions?
I have a question about Poland. How many Jews are in Poland today?
Well, it's hard to say. I've heard numbers like 5,000 admit to being Jewish, but there are probably 25,000, okay? It's in that ballpark. 3,300,000, oh yeah. But there were 300,000 that survived. Don't think that only 5,000. Don't forget, like me, we left. People went to Israel, people went to America, Argentina. There were countries that did accept these survivors. What's really sad, and I put this up there as a slide that Gabriella, both of us have. Some guy named Albert Einstein. You guys know who he is? I hope so. The world is a dangerous place to live. Not because of the people who are evil, but because of the people who don't do anything about it. Just think about that statement. You see, during the war, in fact, if you ever go to the LA Holocaust Museum, which we just took our friends this afternoon there for the first time, that's the one near the Grove, not the one on Pico. You'll see LA magazine, LA newspapers, the Los Angeles Times all around. They start in 1933 and have front page articles about Jews. And they go into 41, 42, 43, and so on. So the world knew. And unfortunately, that last sentence, they chose not to do anything. There were people that went into camps. Gabriella can tell us better because she's a docent. She knows it better. Tell us the story about it.
Well, there was a gentleman named Jan Karski, not Jewish. They smuggled him inside a camp to see what's going on. They got him out, and he went to Churchill. Churchill did not even talk to him, just the second in charge. He was telling what's happening with Jewish people in the camps. Then he went to Roosevelt. Roosevelt did talk to him, but didn't do anything. So they knew. There is a book about Jan Karski. You can read it. Quite interesting. Also, there were two Slovak Jewish engineers who were in Auschwitz and somehow escaped. And they came home and they drew a map. Where is what? Where is the crematorium? Where is the gas chamber? And so on and so on. And got it out from the country, sent it to Roosevelt. They were hoping they will bomb the place, or at least the railroads. going there, but they didn't. Yes.
Do you feel any special obligation as Jews and as survivors to try to help people in the world now, like the Rohingya Muslims? Do you feel that we have or you personally have an extra obligation to try to stop things that are going on now?
But repeat the question.
The answer is absolutely. Just read again that last sentence in Albert Einstein, right? Now, the question is, what can we do? I don't know. But individually, a lot of things can be done. Yes, we must stop. You know, as I mentioned at the beginning of my talk, the Holocaust, of course, was the worst thing that ever happened in mankind. Okay? Nothing even comes close to the Holocaust. When you talk about 11 million people, 6 million Jewish people, 50% of our population, of the Jewish population worldwide. So, you know, but there are many others. Yes, I know, we know that. And, you know, why do we talk? That's another question. We talk because we want these young people to try to remember what can happen if they don't see each other as equals, or they see faults in each other's, or they see different colors of people and so on. That's why we talk. We want them to realize this is what started it all. Uh-oh, we're being...
Now you will be cut off. I'm not the only one.
First, let me say,
yeah, I know.
as always, it is truly a privilege. Like, I don't mean that lightly. It is such a privilege for us to hear your story. And in our tradition, the idea of shamor v'sachor, the idea of keeping and remembering, is crucial. And so for us to now hold on to and keep and remember your story is how we transmit to the next generation. So I want to thank you so much. Yes. I want to make sure that we get a picture with you. So what we're going to do is this. We're going to take a picture, and I'll explain how in a second. And then if you do not have a parent here, you're going to very quietly make your way down to carpool. If you do have a parent here and they're fine with it and want to stay and ask a few more questions, then we'll do that, okay? So what I want for you guys to do is if you can just go like midway up the steps, and everybody in your row is just going to